if the corporate is asking something very specific, you should really be sure that it's not only dedicated for their own need. Because in that case, it means that the product you would have developed is not scalable. The biggest issue that data center will face is access to energy right now. That's the only bottleneck in AI adoption. Because if you want to have more AI, you need to have more data center. More data center equal more energy needed. And unfortunately, the grid is not right now designed to afford to have these new loads. And that's now are 100 megawatts, 200, 500, even 1 gigawatt data centers these days.
Welcome to the Seed to Sequoia podcast. I'm your host, Alex Shartsis. If you enjoyed this episode or a regular follower, please like and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps other people find it and other founders benefit from what our guests talk about. Today on the podcast, we're going to hear from a new kind of guest, Gregoire Viasnoff. He is a corporate venture capitalist, so he works at the venture arm of a large corporation, in this case, Schneider Electric, and his company is called SC Ventures. Gregoire is a extremely interesting person on the personal side. He mountaineers. He does a lot of really interesting and hardcore things. Professionally, he's built a practice at SC Ventures that's like the opposite of Y Combinator. So think 2 or 3, big bets a year with a lot of focus and help. So today we're going to talk about a lot of really interesting things. What is corporate venture? When is it the right choice? When is it maybe not the right choice? AI, climate tech, so many interesting subjects. So I welcome you to join me in listening to this podcast with Gregoire.
So my name is Gregoire. I'm leading the incubation practice of SC Ventures, which is a corporate venture arm of Schneider Electric. So really excited to disclose a little bit more what we are doing and how we can collaborate together.
Really excited to talk to you. You're our first corporate VC on the podcast, and I think it's especially in the climate tech and even to a certain extent these days in the AI space, corporate VC has a much bigger role than it used to. So would love to know how you became a corporate VC. What was your journey to your current role?
Well, very, very good one. And you're right. It's not necessarily a very straightforward path because I restarted my career as an engineer, graduating from one of the highest engineering school in France. But then I always had a business development position in large aerospace, military, and energy renewable spaces. But I always had, I would say, a deep passion about innovation because when I was really selling and promoting the new product with global customers, there were always a real appetite from them to drive one step further as innovation. So I've always cultivated, this capability to work with partners, with startups, and I had the opportunity to incubate very few ones along my career. And 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to join the very recently created SC Venture platform at the head of incubation. And for me, it was just, the natural way to gather all my learnings as deep technical engineers and software developer plus sales background while working in large corporates where I know exactly where they are very strong at and what are the needs clearly that any startup can fulfill, and really gathering all these different knowledges in one practice, helping company to really go through the 0 to 1 phase, which is usually one of the most complicated. So when I really had this opportunity to take this job, I really thought that I could be super helpful for my employer, so Schneider Electric, really driving their own innovation one step further, but also for the startups and providing both insights, mentorship, access to market through the mothership of Schneider Electric, and anyway, of course, capital, because we are tapping into the SC Venture platform, so as an investor.
So what differentiates corporate VC from regular VC? I want to ask about incubation, which you touched on, but let's do the basics first. What are the fundamental differences?
Well, You're right. And by the way, let's acknowledge that most of the CVCs, especially in the past, had a very bad reputation. So clearly, we fight like hell and with a very, very clear data point. And why I think most of the CVC used to have a pretty bad reputation, because their only bottom line was strategic bottom line. Which is how I can create pre-M&A files, for example, which is really one of the worst things I think you can do. Right. And then negotiating pretty bad terms for the funders in the term sheet, including offers and so on. And that's exactly...
Yeah, they've killed, I mean, they killed a friend of mine's company, the Alta Motorbikes, Harley Davidson was like, yeah, we just don't want this to exist. And
exactly.
So there's a history.
Exactly, and that's why I was really mentioning very specific data points that clearly demonstrated that their only bottom line was purely strategic. So that's what makes, I think, the fundamental difference in between traditional CVCs versus financial VCs, which have a very simple financial bottom line, which drive also, I would say, pros and cons. A lot of pros in terms of alignment with incentives of the funders, but also cons because you have seen, I would say, a lot of deals where these financial incentives was leading to crazy terms in the term sheet and not always in favors of the investors themselves or sometimes to the funders. So that's what I think make deeply the difference in between the two platforms. And that's why what I really enjoy also joining SE Venture platform, because we clearly and deeply acknowledged that, and we really create a unique and hybrid model, which has a double bottom line, strategic, because we have one single LP, Schneider Electric, but also clearly financial. The way we have structured the platform and the way the team is incentivized and the legal one is really mimicking a pure financial VC. So we are independent in our investment committee, and that's why I think we take the best of the two worlds with a real clear financial incentives for the benefit to the platform, to our LP and to the funders for sure, but also bringing more than capital with some acceleration capabilities. 60%, for example, of our portfolio companies have a commercial agreement with the mothership of Schneider Electric. So really clearly demonstrating that we have this acceleration ones.
Maybe before we jump into other questions, like tell people about Schneider Electric, because it's one of those companies that I think you probably are a customer of them, even if you don't recognize the brand name.
Oh yeah, you're right. And by the way, in the name itself, you're right. You see exactly how we are at the edge of that, which is we are not Schneider Electric Venture, we are SE Ventures. So Schneider Electric is the world leader in energy management and Industry 4.0. So we are present all across the globe. 1/3 in the US. Our biggest geography is US. 1/3 in Asia, with of course a big part in China, and 1/3 in Europe.
What are some of the bigger products or more well-known products that Schneider is? I realize there's a lot of them.
I'm pretty sure that if you open your electrical panel right now in your home, you will see some black breakers with a Square D logo on it, because we are present in one home out of 2 in the US. So all these black breakers are coming from Schneider Electric. We are operating under the Square D names in the residential space in the US. But if you go in most of the factories in the US, that's very likely that you would have also an Aviva platform, which is orchestrating and managing all the operation of the plants. And Aviva is one of the best brand of Schneider Electric. So we have a very broad set of activities from pure residential up to the most complex data center and factories in the world.
How do you approach corporate VC as SE Ventures, and how does that differentiate you from others? Like how does, as a founder, if I'm talking to you versus one of your competitors or somebody totally different, like what am I getting that's different and what should I be looking for?
Yeah, that's first of all, I think it's really about the trust we can build together. What does it mean concretely is how we are able to accelerate the funders in the company with our subject matter expert and reseller capabilities. So that's, I would say, the core usually of the discussion. So the way we clearly differentiate is how together we can effectively fast track the market hit of this company. And of course, the discussion is very different if you are a very early stage company versus a pretty late stage company. And the type of commercial agreement we can define is slightly different. However, the goal is always the same, which is increasing your top line very, very concretely in the geographies either you are not yet strong at or where anyway you have some lacks that can be accelerated.
Let's talk about that difference. I'm curious, like when is it a good idea to go to SE Ventures or corporate VC when you're at the seed stage? Like what is the value that one would get there versus Series C, Series D, later stage? That's where CVC has always traditionally played, is in that growth stage. But you do all your work almost, seems like most of it from our conversations, in that incubation early stage, which is not typical for CVC.
Yeah, you're right. One key thing that differentiates us is we have the capability to support the funders from their ideation phase. So when it's still only a PowerPoint, up to the later stage of a Series C's or even D's. So meaning that in terms of check size, it can really be from a few hundreds K to a couple of millions. And that's something very, very differentiative. And once again, we have different people also in the platform focusing on the different stages, being able to have the right mindset and to support the companies with their exact needs. So we have also veteran in the platform, knowing exactly how to navigate in a large corporate, just to be sure that it would remain simple for the startup that have zero time to waste in navigating in the complex ecosystem. So all in all, how concretely does it materialize? I was mentioning that 60% have a commercial agreement which is signed. So here it's really a clear win-win. Most of the time we can resell this solution, but it can also bring very different stages. Because, for example, if you start even more earlier, let's say at seed, usually it's pretty complex to have a reseller agreement because your product is not mature enough. So it's more about how you can discuss with dozens, hundreds of customers, setting some POCs, clarifying your own value prop. We have times also signed some R&D agreements with these very early stage startups. So providing also some non-dilutive funds, with also a very smart way on the IP side, because this is always where the discussion is tricky. And we know that these startups are not there to execute any Schneider Electric roadmap. That's purely, I would say, something which is a win-win without any IP stealing of any kind, neither really requesting the IP. So all this kind of mindset has been really integrated into the platform, and we are spending a lot of time also on educating the mothership on why doing all this is really for the benefit of the startup and for the company. And this is really a shift that really happened in the mothership. I can really clearly acknowledge it because I've been part and I've been on both sides, let's say, of this equation. And Schneider Electric has really understood that now, if they want to scale much faster than their competitors, they need to animate a full ecosystem. And especially in the new energy landscape where we are in, things are moving so fast that if you try to control, if you try to structure on very, very precisely your ecosystem, you will never be able to scale. So you need to take a little bit bigger risk, bigger bets. Investing in startup is part of that, but really collaborating with them, with some partnership, with some R&D spendings with them and so on, is part of this overall ecosystem of innovation that we want to accelerate.
Yeah, so I want to talk about incubation and innovation, but before we do, I'm curious. So 60% having a commercial agreement means that a commercial agreement isn't required for investment, right? So it sounds like, at least for for SE Ventures, you don't need to have a commercial agreement necessarily. There might be, is the motivation strategic? Like this is a place where you're interested, even though maybe the mothership isn't ready to partner with that company, or is it purely financial? Like you're just very excited about that particular business and want to invest for the returns.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a very good data point because it demonstrates that we are independent in our decision. The company has to be really, let's say, fully scalable and investable to get, I would say, an approval from our investment committee. And we know very well that the good deals needs to be decided very fast. So if you are putting everything in a row, that maybe was a very traditional way of you start with a POC, with your mothership and blah, 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 and blah, 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 you're even dead before you are able to enter into the round. So, which means that...
do you mean like is it from the CVC standpoint, you missed the round because by the time you did that POC and the rest of it, like they closed it and they're on... Well, I think that's one of the benefits of how you operate. And one of the big changes in CVC is before you only had that kind of time if you were a Series C or Series D company. And now, if you guys will invest without that, that changes it. Right now, I could talk to SE Ventures because I don't have to wait 6 months to close a round or a year. I mean, it could take a long time.
Yeah, you're spot on, and that's why we always anyway think what could be the strategic synergies. Sometimes because the company is also pivoting. So it happened that we signed initially a commercial agreement, and then the startup is anyway changing his strategy, their own strategy, because they are moving also very fast, and the new strategy is probably a little bit less relevant for the mothership. So that's why, and it's normal. If you are not having this capability, it means that once again you would be in a way too narrow approach. And that's sometimes the opposite, which is also happening, is because the company is still a little bit too early. So it's still too early to sign a commercial agreement. And as soon as the company would have developed a fully industrialized product, at that time, a commercial agreement would be able to be signed. So that's really the both side of this equation that leads to this 60% ratio, which I think is really great. And once again, if we were going way above 60, till 100%, it means that we would not take sufficient earlier bets. We would only leverage industrialized products. And at the opposite, it means that we would have secured so many things before investing that we would have missed, I think, the best investment. So that's a very good ratio for me.
When is, like, you talked about early stage, late stage. I think that's unique for SE Ventures. When is going to a CVC or engaging CVC, when is that a mistake? Like, are there times where it's like you just shouldn't, these are the wrong people to talk to?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is to build, I would say, a business case that would clearly rely too much on a CVC. So for me, it's really about building trust. So if you are, let's say, too pushy from one side on another, this is where usually the relationship is not successful. Let me explain that a little bit more clearly manner. If you are, I would say, engaging a corporate because you are really struggling to have a market hit, and you really consider that the only way to be successful is now to sign, let's say, this big CVC that would really sign day one a big reseller agreement, and your P&L would skyrocket, it will never happen like that. So you should not engage this way. Now, at the opposite, if you have, by the way, a CVC which is too pushy and clearly willing to hook you and asking you to develop things only for them, that's where you should also run pretty fast. So that's why I say do not have, I would say, too strong relationship in between the mothership, the CVC, the corporate part of the CVC, and the startup. Now, if it's a real win-win, because the company can effectively accelerate, get faster insights, maybe slightly adjust or test some features, And when the product is fully industrialized or mature, being accelerated by your reseller agreements, that's a clear hit, a massive hit. At the opposite, if the corporate is willing really to accelerate as part of a full value prop, this is where they really enhanced their solution, and that's a real win-win. So it's really a question of balanced relationship for me in between both, and really managing expectation on both sides.
That's so two questions on that. Super interesting. That first example, the mistake, sounded a lot like desperation on the part of the company, right? That they can't figure out how to go to market, so their solution to that is CVC, or they can't figure out, or they'll do whatever the CVC wants them to do because they have no choice, right? It's the only kind of the last money they're able to raise. Am I kind of right in that assessment? Like, is it that sort of approach from a more desperate or weaker standpoint versus, as you said, like a partnership of equals?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you need to really manage expectations, and you must consider the corporate as an accelerator only, and not as the only way for you to make business. In other words,
right. And if your CVC comes in and asks you, like, hey, so you kind of referenced, that partnership where you as a company bring a lot of value, and you have your own vision for the market. The CVC sees that vision, aligns with it, right? That's on, maybe not on the roadmap directly, but is an innovative path they'd like to follow. Maybe you pivot, maybe you don't, but like at the moment you invest, you see the sort of the vectors going in the same direction. How does a founder sort of decide, like, oh, if my corporate, venture board member asks me to do this thing or brings up this thing, like, do they always say yes? Like, in your experience, are there good examples of people saying yes and saying no, or because I've seen founders really struggle out where their corporate CVC investors say, oh, can you do this? And they run off and do it. I was like, that wasn't on a roadmap. It wasn't in the plan for the year. Why are we doing that just because they made an offhand remark at the board meeting? I know that isn't your style, but I'm curious, like, what have you seen from founders, like, where they manage that well?
Yeah, that's a good one, and my answer would be close to the previous one, which is the relationship has to be balanced. So if people are asking from one side to another, it's because there is in return something very, very tangible. So if a corporate is really asking some evolution and so on, there needs to take a written commitment on how it would really benefit to the startup, to the venture, and being sure that they would be really materializing that into additional revenue. And you have a lot of people asking a lot of things and so on, but then not committing on any return. So that's really where I think you have an unbalanced situation, because they are not taking risk on what they are asking. And here, this is where it should be a clear no-go before implementing any features. But at the opposite, even if the corporate is asking something very specific, you should really be sure that it's not only dedicated for their own need. And because in that case, it means that the product you would have developed is not scalable. Right. And here you also have, I would say, a real issue. So it's really about the capability to get the insight of the market, test that, but being sure that once again it would be fully scalable for the company. And and that's where, by the way, depending on the maturity stage of the startup, it's a very different set of advice. For example, when you are, let's say, at later stage, it's really about, for example, how do you implement AI in your strategy with maybe paid features or unpaid features, enhancing the experience? What are the best practices that we have in Schneider Electric that we are able anyway to monetize with them and so on? So this is, I think, some clear win-win discussions that can drive additional revenue for both startups. When it's way earlier stages, for example, is more about, the strategic alignment, the vision, how we anticipate the market within 2, 3, 4 years. I can give you one concrete example on what we have done in that regard. For example, if you are back in the 2021 in the battery industry, everyone was claiming that batteries would clearly follow the track of solar panels, which is a Chinese commodity. And therefore, there were no way for any large players to create, I would say, a sustainable and profitable battery industry, especially in Europe and US. We were clearly against that vision for many strategic reasons that were not related to Schneider Electric, but because our people really working in that domain really understood that the weight of a battery and how deep into the car it would lead very, very different behaviors. So, and I can tell you in 2020, you had very, very few people thinking like that. Unfortunately, we have been able with a few corporates really to prime, I would say, this type of projects that have led to the incorporation of Verkor, for example, in Europe, that maybe you're aware has raised now 3 billion to execute the first or among the first gigafactories for Europe. So you need also to have, I would say, these people that can give you some deep insights on their vision on the market that help you to shape the right product and the right vision for an early stage startup.
That's great. And so it sounds like in that example, CVC is really, it's really a strategic asset of the company to help bring that. I'm curious, I think we should talk about incubation, but it was your role in that really to incubate that startup and get them to that sort of unicorn valuation.
Yeah, exactly. Our job, at least the way we practice that, and I think it's also relatively unique on the market, is what a CVC is strong at is providing this market insight, surfacing, I would say, the real maturity of some market opportunities and the capability really to have a real market need out of it. So when you are surfacing on one hand this real great market data supported with real customers, and on the other hand, you bring entrepreneurs, and then in the cap table, you shape in a balanced way financial assets coming from financial VCs and equity and strategic relationship with CVCs, that's the best recipe. Because once again, you have a very, very balanced board, balanced situation, and you are really leveraging clear market insights that make your product much more relevant.
How do you create that venture? Do you have a model behind it, or is it very bespoke? I assume it's different incubation versus later stage, but maybe just focus on incubation. How do you create those? What are the issues that you see when you're doing that?
Yeah, so that's really a pretty, let's say, pragmatic process. And concretely, what does it mean? You have few things that must be privileged. First of all, is really quality over quantity. Then what does it mean? It's you need really to be sure that all the key criteria would be met in terms of quality of funders, quality of the opportunity, the right timing also. So you have a lot of criteria to be met, and that's why if one of these criteria is not met, you should not move forward into the incubation. So clearly, quality prevails over quantity. The second topic is being sure that you are really taking a real pain which is mature enough. What do I mean? Because among the key questions that we are asking ourselves is, if it's not yet already developed by others, there should be a big reason out of that.
Right.
So why? Maybe because no one had the idea. Okay, we can, but that's a bit arrogant because usually a lot of things have been assessed. So what is your deep conviction? What has changed over the past months, over the past years, maybe allowing you to solve the problem differently? Or maybe just because the problem is getting really hotter and hotter. So all this timing discussion is very, very important when you incubate something new. So quality, timing are for me the definitely the key criteria in terms of business. And last but not least, of course, funders, motivation of the funders. And in our model, that's not an SE venture incubation. That's an incubation led by tier one funders owning their own company in the cap table and supported by CVCs and VCs. And that's once again the way we're also working with an ecosystem of friendly financial VCs, participating to the incorporation and the co-incubation of these models. So once again, if you want to hook that into a model where you own the cap table or you have some veto rights and so on, it's no longer, the funder's project. It becomes the early stage fund or the CVC project. And that's the end, day one of the success.
Well, so when you say quality, are you? I think you include a bunch of things in quality, right? It's not only the founders, it's also the product, the business model, right? I mean, the size of the market they're going after. Right? It's not. You need to see quality. I'm assuming you need to see quality across all of those things before you get interested.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, by the way, it's pretty tough because you have so many criterias to be met that leads on our side maybe to 2 incubation per year max. That's
two total.
Yeah, 2 total per year. Yeah, 2 total per year.
Wow.
Because
but those, I mean, I'm assuming if you are one of the 2, you're pretty successful then. Like that's, I mean, it's not a lottery ticket necessarily, but like if you meet the criteria, like what are some of the outcomes? I don't know if you can talk about specific companies, but like how does that go for those couple of companies?
Well, I would say overall our incubation practice is very successful financially wise, with, as always in any venture studio or very early stage fund, 1 or 2 winners clearly pulling the whole financial attractiveness and performance of the practice. I was mentioning Verkor now, who raised the 3 billion. So clearly Verkor is one of our best assets. But we have others on their path, I think, to become or to have post money above 100 million. So clearly driving also a very significant return. Now it takes time also, because since you are really starting from the inception, it's at least 5 to 10 years journey before exiting. And since we started now 5 years ago, we have not yet really exited a lot of unicorns de facto, but the fair market value and the IRR is very successful. Yeah. And our, I would say, methodology and let's say the way we are practicing it now is also based on all the feedbacks and our past experiences, really just to be sure that we have now the right scalable recipe.
I mean, it's a very different model than, say, a Y Combinator that has hundreds of incubation companies, and it's sort of like the Lord of the Flies out there. Like you go figure out how to be the best one of these 300-400 companies and you'll get a great round, but the other 290 of you are going to fall by the wayside. For you, it's like once you get through that gate, like you get a lot of resources and a lot of attention in order to be incubated and be successful. And I think it's a fundamentally different approach.
It's a fundamentally different approach, and that's why, by the way, we do not consider at all to try to compete against YC or whatever. What we are, I think, very pragmatically providing is really surfacing things that we consider now are mature and are still untapped. Okay, and how we can help funders on these very few things where we have a deep belief that this is the right timing to do it. And that's where we have some pretty good and discussion with the funders, why they should really work on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so that gets me to kind of my favorite question here, which is, what are you excited about these days? I know you and I have talked a bunch about the different things you're exploring. And I think, so people may not realize this, but like when you're connected with a company like Schneider, you know everybody's problems because you have a whole team of salespeople out there and engineers trying to figure out the problem. So I'm very curious to hear what you're interested in right now, because it's well informed.
You have, I would say, a couple of topics that are very hot for us. Data center, for sure. The biggest issue that data center will face is access to energy right now. That's the only bottleneck in AI adoption. Because if you want to have more AI, you need to have more data center. More data center equal more energy needed. And unfortunately, the grid is not right now designed to afford to have these new loads that now are 100 megawatts, 200, 500, even 1 gigawatt data centers these days. So
is that bigger than crypto? I mean, I remember hearing this with crypto 5 years ago, but is it even more than that?
I defer to anyone to make that judgment, but clearly crypto was for me a big niche market, and we have seen, by the way, that it has not been really scaled. While AI, I think I would really challenge right now anyone really claiming that AI is not having a massive adoption for all the different use cases. The AI has now deeply entered in all our lives. I think you have attended or seen, I think, what Apple has done these days, which for me is one of the most interesting one, by the way, demonstrating how they're partnering, of course, with now the biggest LLM ones, but also demonstrating how hardware needs to be deeply associated to AI. AI is not something magic. So you have a lot of energy, data centers, chips running behind that. And if you do not have the right hardware, it doesn't give you the right experience in terms of latency, in terms of data privacy, and so on and so forth. So how you rethink this overall AI capabilities with more frugal model, consuming less energy, data center able also to consume less energy, or to have access to more renewable energy that are not intermittent. What you can do with a 100 megawatt data center is not achievable for a 500 or 1 gigawatt data center. You cannot put storage everywhere and solar system everywhere and so on. So all these model has to be rethought, and that's really happening now, and that would be way bigger than crypto, for sure.
So it's not something I would have, like, you watched NVIDIA when we last chatted. NVIDIA was worth like half a trillion less than it is today. I mean, it's, trillion with a T. It's kind of amazing, the growth there. And it's not something a layperson would think of, like, oh, where is all the power coming from for each server rack and each data center? So that's really interesting. Well,
maybe there is also something that I could surface, which is as one of the leading company in the energy management field, there is something that is clearly changing our world. Also, is what we call prosumer. How now you have producer and consumer of your energy. The first revolution in this prosumer space was in the early 2000s, when you had solar and wind really started to disrupt the supply part. Okay. Now EV, since 2015, let's say, has disrupted the demand, because now you have, I would say, huge electric loads happening on the demand side. So that's where the two first revolution. And there is a third revolution, which is that will come in the next 3 to 10 years that we are actively working on, where you need to manage, I would say, an optimized system, recovering the waste, recovering the heat, for example, of the data centers, where you need really to accelerate all the CCUS technology, which is how once you have, let's say, disrupted the supply, you have disrupted the demand side, you create a much more circular way to manage the energy and the waste associated to its energy into a much more optimized system. And this third wave is something super interesting, I think, for funders to position their future company into a very, very trendy move.
Is that at the data center level, the manufacturing plant level, at the house level? Like where is that gonna play out, or will it be everywhere?
Well, I think you have use cases that can be monetized way more simply than others. So this is where I think the disruption will start. So on the waste management and for data centers, I think that's pretty obvious. That's ongoing. On the CCUS part and the way you can really much more create and clean on this atmosphere. It's not yet clear where the winners will be. You have so many solutions. Probably, by the way, that would be a mix in between many solutions. But I think here we have not yet clearly, I would say, cracked the nuts. So that's where I still think that there are some huge business opportunity for digital model with orchestration platforms and so on, while also still needing a lot of innovation on the technologies themselves that would capture this carbon and use them.
What do you look for at SC Ventures from a go-to-market perspective?
Well, once again, very different depending on the stages of the company. If you are at the later stage, that's really about scalability. So how you can achieve your hockey stick in terms of market adoption, leveraging a very scalable manner with a lower customer acquisition cost. Okay, so that's really where you want to saturate all the go-to-markets, leveraging an ecosystem of partners, of distributors, or with a great SEO strategy, whatever it is. But really, the thing that really matters is scalability versus CAC, just to be sure that your business case is realistic. So that's really, let's say, on the push capability that we are really eager to understand. At the opposite, when you are at the very beginning of your journey, I still see a lot of business case where people are supposed to rely on partners, on distributors, on added value resellers, whoever you call them. The reality that when you are early, the only way is to take your destiny in your own hands and
yes.
really sell directly and really capturing your first 100 customers by your own means, understanding very deeply with them. So that's clearly a pull approach. And even if it's not your ultimate go-to-market, once again, being sure that you are animating these key early adopters that would be your future ambassadors. So one is, let's say, more very handmade, relying on one or two salespeople only, and that's where you need to hire great chief revenue officer, salespeople, to really animate these first early adopter communities. While on the other hand, is about industrializing new go-to-markets and leveraging probably much more digital means.
Yeah, that's going to be a highlight. I feel like that right there was gold for founders. So for you, let's talk maybe more about the companies that you've invested in and you've been working with. What are the mistakes that you see founders make that really matter, that could affect their outcome or could affect sort of the company in a larger way?
The biggest mistakes that they are making are usually a sum of small things that is deteriorating the trust in between us and the team, the execution team. Overselling topics, hiding issues, being very transparent with us has always been fruitful. Because we know, and that may be something that makes us also a little bit special as a corporate, that when you have people ready to support you from the PowerPoint, don't try to sell us a $1 billion business case within 2 years. We know it will never happen. So don't even try. And we still receive some decks, even at a later stage, where people are overselling everything. And I think it's really among the worst mistake with us. It doesn't mean that you should not be bold. You can be very, very bold and you can be very aggressive and so on, but it has to be trustable. And especially when you commit on something and when we are working at the board and you commit on something, deliver. If you do not deliver, for sure, warn the board way in advance. And just because you are transparent, there are some good reasons. And then you can also challenge your board members. you should ask them for more support. In most of the times, I see in the minutes of the board a lot of actions to the management, but there is also one best practice, which is put some actions in the to-dos to the board members. They are not usually very keen with that, but that's also that's what really builds this trust. Because if they're also executing for the benefit of the company, they would be more demanding, and then you create, I would think, a positive will.
Yeah, you took my next question, which is what do you wish founders would ask you for? No, it's like I think that's tremendous advice. And when you think about your board, and I think it's interesting talking to you about this, what should founders look for in board members before they invite them to invest or they invite them onto the board if they're independent?
I think it's really shaping a long-term vision and being robust enough to cope all the different downs that will happen. So really supporting the funders when they are in a tough period. That's where, if you have really bets on the team, and if you were really deeply believing at the beginning in this team, in their product and in their project, you should be, let's say, very hard on the problem to solve, but probably keen on the people. And keen on the people doesn't mean that you would accept anything. If people, for example, if at the end you need to change a CEO, you need to change a CEO. That's your duty as a board member. But it has to be done, let's say, for the benefit of the company. There is a good rationale, and that's not something that should surprise everyone. And I've seen a couple of examples like that, where the change of CEO, for example, was very, very beneficial for everyone, including the CEO itself, because he was a great 0 to 1 guy, but clearly not a 1 to 10 guy. And how, for example, you manage this transition. So you need, once again, hard on the problem. Don't make any, let's say, compromission on the way you want to solve the problem. But if you still want to keep the trust of everyone, doing in a very human manner with the teams and all the teams, and reward the team also in consequences. We are learning alongside the funders. So curiosity is probably the biggest quality that I think everyone should have in this industry, beyond with the execution of skills, of course, but really being humble and the capability to scale together is something that I really wanted to highlight.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that leads me to the questions I ask everybody, because it's fun to hear the patterns. What are 3 best practices you wish every founder would do? It doesn't have to be go-to-market specific.
I was mentioning to curiosity, which is clearly something very very important, no doubt. But building the best team is beyond the funders. Is something probably also very, very important, because at the end, that the team that executes, so the capability to attract talents beyond the very few ones that are the core of the startup, is absolutely critical. And the last one is day one, think global. It doesn't mean that day one you need to have operations in all the countries of the world, but day one, think global and understand how your model can be fully scalable. Is probably something which is absolutely obvious. For example, if you see how Israeli companies are operating, they just use Israel as a sounding board, but then scale day one in Europe and in the US. And you still have a lot of US companies only thinking about US because the domestic market is so big. That's great. But if you really want to be a huge global leaders, you should really start to have also different people coming from different origins and so on. And if you are in Europe or in Asia, your domestic market is way too small. So definitely you need to have something that has to be thought as a global company day one.
So what's the best advice you ever got?
Improve your strengths rather than trying to compensate your weaknesses.
That's great. That's great advice. I've so frequently somebody told me that you don't even know your strengths all the time because it comes so naturally. You don't even realize that you're good at a thing because you didn't work at it.
Exactly. And we are in a high performance culture. So you need to differentiate because the few strengths you have are really, really strong. And then back to my comment, build the best team around you to compensate your weaknesses, but don't try to necessarily compensate themselves or directly with your own behaviors.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it's great advice to end on. So how can people find you? LinkedIn, I assume? Where's
LinkedIn,
a good place
for sure. My pleasure to answer on LinkedIn. And that's the beauty of my name. You will not find, I would say, Tom Viasnoff. So you should find me pretty easily, and I'm very reactive on LinkedIn. Yes, and otherwise you can also send me an email on gregoire.viasnoff@se.com.
Great, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Well, Gregoire, thank you so much for joining us, listeners. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. Got to ask every time. It really helps other people find the podcast. Our audio engineer and video editor is James Fix. Ryan DaCosta works on the marketing side of production. Our music is by The Great White Shark. Again, I'm Alex. Thank you very much for listening.